On to question number 3, and the question goes first to Tim James. Using stimulus dollars as something of bait, President Barack Obama is coaxing various states around the nation to rewrite education law, as well as to cut deals with unions as they compete for the $5 billion offered in school reform grants. Considering that Alabamians receive $1.40 for every $1 sent to Washington, how would you protect Alabamians from federal government central planning and overreach without jeopardizing education funding for our children?
Federal mandates that come down ought to be paid for by the federal government. Of course, Bob Riley resisted some of the stimulus package, as they should. If they mandate it, they should pay for it. The question is getting much deeper as the total dollars, our deficits explode, and we're over $15 trillion. I watched the governor of California recently get on his big fancy jet and fly to Washington and stick that big Terminator hand out and ask the American taxpayers to give the people of California $42 billion to bail them out of their operational budget. The fact of the matter is, it is time to say enough is enough. Every family in this room is tightening their belt, and you're having to do what you have to do to get by in tough times. The state of Alabama must do the same, and the federal government also, to explode these deficits and put this burden on the backs of our children and our grandchildren is unconscionable. So when the federal government sends money and makes promises and puts strings in education and everything that we do, we have to resist it with vigor and be willing to say no. And also we must be willing to team up with other states that have good common sense governors and people that understand what's really going on. There's great power in numbers, and we must always remember that.
Thank you. Dr. Bentley.
There are two issues here that I'd like to talk about. Number one is, let's first talk about the issue that Tim just mentioned that dealt with unemployment stimulus dollars these were dangled in front of us to say there are 16 states that if you will change your laws, we will give you stimulus dollars. I stood up on the House floor and I spoke against that because that was totally wrong for the federal government to threaten us with our money that we send to Washington to say that if you will change your laws, then we will give back to you the money that is already your money. At the present time in the education budget, we have $1 billion in stimulus money, and this year we have spent $500 million of that on our education appropriations in the Education Appropriations Committee, which I serve on. So we had $500 million of stimulus money this last year. We will have $500 million this next year. The next year, it's going to be a very difficult situation for the state of Alabama. And you need a governor who has served on the Education Appropriations Committee like I have, written and rewritten budgets for the last 7.5 years, who understands budgets, who will know how to make the right decisions where it can be cut, because we have to tighten our belts. One of the great things about Alabama, and we talk about proration all the time, and we talk about how bad proration is in Alabama. Folks, proration is not bad. And the reason it's not bad is that says that we can't spend more money than we have. So Alabama is in better shape than California because we can't have deficit spending in Alabama. So that's why proration, now we could avoid proration if we budgeted differently, and I hope we have some questions on that. But let me tell you, proration is not bad because that means we're not spending more money than we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
As a former head of the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs, I can kind of speak directly to this issue. We managed a lot of the federal grant dollars that came into the state, and they all at some levels have strings to them. Seatbelt laws, helmet laws, graduated driver's license, things like that. But when we got the $200 million plus extra this year through our agency, they had Obama and his liberal colleagues had put an unprecedented level of social engineering strings on it. And basically what was required, what we were required to do in some levels was totally try to transform the direction and future of this state. And the only way to really fight that is by having a governor that understands what the 10th Amendment is and to stand up for it and to stand up against the mandates that the feds are trying to put on our tax dollars. What happened exactly in our program was we had $67 million of money coming down for energy. And what the requirement was for that was that we had to agree to adopt international energy code standards. Well, there was such a hue and cry, not just from us, but from other states, that the feds basically backed off and said, okay, you'll have to sign an agreement that you will try to implement them. And then it was like, well, no. And then it was try to implement them with 8 years. Basically what they did, by having the majority of the states stand up against these kind of social re-engineering efforts by the Obama administration, having enough of those states stand up and having a governor that will stand up on these issues, they will back off. I have seen it directly. They backed off of those, the energy fund requirements, and we got the energy dollars and didn't have to apply these international energy code standards.